Good evening. Please welcome to the stage 2003 AERA Presidential Program Co-Chair, Dr. Ebony McGee.
Hello, AERA family. I want to welcome everyone joining us person and virtually through live stream to the open preliminary session of the 2023 AERA Annual Meeting. I am Ebony McGee, and I bring you greetings from my hometown, Chicago. Hey! If you are from Chicago, or if you claim Chicago, and yes, I am going to include the suburbs, stand up, let us see you. Yes, yes, I love it. I am a proud product of Chicago Public Schools. Yes, Chicago house music, Chicago roller skating, and Chicago style stepping. So welcome and enjoy our glorious culture. I want to acknowledge my co-chairs, Lori O'Connor and Mark Gooden. Can you both please stand up and be acknowledged? You two are the definition of the term teamwork makes the dream work. The three of us are here because of our favorite person in the Academy. And I'm going to say it like Dr. Linda Tillman said it earlier today. Dr. H. Rich Milner IV. Don't forget the fourth, y'all, because he's a legacy. Don't forget the fourth, who is my most cherished mentor and friend on the planet. We are humbled and grateful by your empathetic leadership and tireless advocacy for human beings and human dignity, whether they may be experiencing incarceration. You care about issues from prenatal to premature death, and an unapologetic focus on Black folks who suffer disproportionately throughout the life course. To your own beautiful and dynamic twin daughters, Anna and Elise, and a special congratulations to you for being smart enough to marry your wife, Shelly Milner, who is one of the coolest sisters ever. Okay, don't cry, Ebony, don't cry. Personally, I do not know where I would be without you, and I'm actually a more grounded and sane woman, because sanity is a thing. And the crazy thing is, there are probably about 100 people in this room who have also been personally touched by your leadership, and the respect that they also have for your humanity and personhood. And when I think about all the people that you mentor, I have to remind myself that at your best is when you are sharing your gifts with others. So I thank you. I also would like to extend a special welcome to the AERA past presidents who continue to be active in the life of AERA. Past presidents, could you please stand up? And Tyrone Howard, you stand up too. Yes. Wonderful. We thank you for your leadership. We have a very special open preliminary today, and we have the truth teller #1 in the house. And Dr. Cornell West, I'm so happy you're here because I'm getting really sick of watching the YouTube reruns of your talk. So I'm glad to be here in person with you, and you are just as gracious as I thought you were. So thank you, my brother. We also would like to extend a welcome to the youth who are with us. And I'm not talking about just young in your mind. I'm talking about if you are a high school student or undergrad or K-12, stand up. Stand up. Yes. Yes. Young people. Young people. Young people. Young people. This is why we do what we do for you. And we learn from you as much as you're learning from us. So we are blessed to have you here. Particularly, I want to shout out Dr. Carol Lee, Dr. Yolanda Majors, Dr. Nicole Pinkert, who all helped to facilitate this, and many others for these programs. AERA is equally committed to diversity and inclusion of our communities and our researchers that we serve, a commitment to diverse modalities of communication. Now, this is my baby. Please listen. This is the first time AERA is doing a Black and Brown marketplace. When I think about the money that we bring into the city, thank you, clap for that, clap for that. Yes. When we think about the money and the resources that we're bringing to the city, and we think about who benefits from these resources, Black and brown businesses are least likely to benefit. And AERA and us as a committee, we decided that we wanted to change that. So starting tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the exhibition hall will be Black-owned businesses. Now, I've already heard from Tyrone Howard that he wants to do it again next year. So what we have to do, thank you, Ty. Thank you, Ty. So what I need you to do, I need you to bum rush these businesses, and I need them to sell out. I need them to sell out. Before you go to Marshall's and Macy's and all of that, stop down and support, Chicago's greatest, okay? Thank you. For tonight's lecture, we first want to start with a recognition of the indigenous communities on whose historic land we stand. However, we also want to acknowledge the first non-recorded, non-indigenous settler to the Chicago area was Jean-Baptiste Point du Sable, who arrived in 1780, a Black man, okay? We want to welcome Pamela Silas, who is the Associate Director of Community Outreach and Engagement at the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research in Northwestern University. She is a longstanding and illustrious leader in the Muna-Muni community. After Pamela provides an Indigenous blessing, she will be followed by the Oklahoma, which means red water drum group, and then the Montu Dance Theater. I am pleased to welcome to the stage Pamela Silas.
Poso, Moanawea, greetings. That's how we say in Menominee. Sekate Weaki, in Eswisian, my traditional name is Sun Shining Through, Sunshine Woman. I'm an enrolled member of the Menominee tribe of Wisconsin and a descendant of the Oneida tribe of Wisconsin. And I'm also a member of the Northwestern University family. I work at my day job, the Center for Native American and Indigenous Research. And I'm honored to be here today to offer a land acknowledgement on behalf of my Chicagoland community. Land acknowledgements have grown it's a practice that's grown over the past few years, and given the erasure of our history and ongoing stories of Native peoples in this region and in this country, it's a good start to restoring our own stories, our own history, and importantly, to remind all that Native American tribes and their communities are vibrant, resilient, and still here. Land acknowledgements are but a small part of the restoration and are but a small part of making our Native communities visible and present. They should not replace the work that needs to be done to learn about tribal sovereignty, history, tribal treaties, or contemporary Native issues and communities, nor should it be considered enough of a commitment to become a good relative or a good ally. And AERA is on a journey, and I'm encouraging all of you who are part of the AERA family to deepen the work and to become a stronger ally. We have some Native businesses too, by the way. If you like my jewelry and my skirt, next year, where are you at? Let's see, I'm off script here. Yesterday, I had the pleasure of spending some time with your colleagues, the Indigenous Peoples of the Americas and the Pacifics, the SIG group. It was a pre-conference gathering hosted by our Center for Native American and Indigenous Research at the Northwestern University campus. And man, I'm inspired by their leadership in their fields of study, and even more importantly, how their work is lifting up our communities as we work in relationship towards a better future for us all. So with that said, I want to give thanks to the Creator of all things for my life and for this beautiful day, and for the safe arrival of all of you that are gathered here at this time. This whole region was the original homelands and territories of the people of the Council of Three Fires, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. It's also home over the years to Ho-Chunk, Miami, and the Menominee, and many other tribes. And just like yesterday when we gathered with the Indigenous and Pacific SIG group, we gathered near the water on the North Shore. Great Native leaders over many years have met on these shores here at Lake Michigan. Native traders bartered on these shores, and many artists have shared their stories and their songs here. This continues to be home to thousands of Native American and Indigenous people, and home to the oldest urban American Indian center in the country. You don't usually think about that when you think of Chicago. So you might have traveled great distances to gather at this very place, this beautiful place by the big water, Lake Michigan. And for the next few days, you'll be making camp with each other. In the old days, while making camp, amazing things occurred. We had to commit to making it a safe camp for everyone. We would learn from each other. We would make new relationships that could last a lifetime. We'd do our part in serving and caring for one another. We'd be mindful of the impact that we have on one another with our words and our actions. And very importantly, we would practice reciprocity, demonstrating our gratitude for what was shared and what was given. We would take all of the experiences from that camp, new ideas, new relationships, back to our home communities and share, seeing it grow exponentially. And of course, this was long before cell phones, commuter planes, and Zoom. So as you gather over the next few days and make camp with one another, acknowledge those original peoples who call this land home and the current Native people who call this land home. Acknowledge those new relationships that you make. Acknowledge all that you receive from this place and from each other. Return safely home, and be generous with your stories and sharing of the skills and the knowledge that you gain here. It is in that action that you honor those people whose original homelands we gather on. So, Wewan and Katan and Manikako, thank you, I say, for everything.
Please welcome to the stage the Oklahoma Drum Group.
Whoa, Please welcome to the stage the Muntu Dance Theater.
Please welcome to the stage the 2022-2023 AERA President, Dr. H. Richard Milner.
All right. Let's give it up. All right. Okay, let's start again. Let's give it up again for the dance crew. That was excellent. That was excellent. The Montu Dance Theater has actually been in existence for 50 years. Let me start again. I'm so excited. That was excellent. That was excellent. The Montu Dance Theater has been in existence for 50 years, and I think we're celebrating something else for 50 years. Hip hop, right? So 50 years, y'all, they have been in existence. So for those of you who are interested, who live in the Chicago area, go check them out. Go check them out. I just want to take this opportunity to thank again Carol Lee. Let's give it up for Carol Lee and all of her hard work, her sending me emails. And Cornell has said many times that he's here because Sister Carol and Sister Safisha has asked him to be here. So I'm so grateful for all the behind the scenes work you did to pull this together. Carol, y'all can do better than that. Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. Thank you, Carol. I want to also take this opportunity to thank and also recognize Nicole Pinkett. I don't know if Nicole is here in the house, but all of the behind the scenes the work that you did, Nicole, I just want to say how appreciative I am to you as well. Let's give it up for Nicole, wherever you are. And to the program chairs, I am so grateful. I know y'all like my shoes, by the way. Y'all like my shoes, y'all do. I am so grateful. I am so thankful to you, Ebony, to you, Lori, to you, Mark. I just want to say it is perfect. In the words of Sean Harper, our former president, I just want to say how grateful I am to you, and everything you've done so far has just been perfect, has just been perfect. Stand up so that you might be recognized. Give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up. You all, I'm so appreciative to you for all that you do, all of the hard work that you've done to pull this meeting together. I also want to recognize Felice Levine. Give it up for Felice. Stand up, Felice. Stand up, stand up. And also, give it up, 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 give it up. Some of y'all still just sitting there looking. But I just want you to know, and also Felice's team, wherever you are, wave your hand. If you stand, I would ask that you stand. Please stand up and be recognized wherever you are. Nathan and Mary and Kendra and all of the AERA, Tony and all of you, stand up. Where are you? I can't see anything up here, but that's all right. I know you're out here. I know you were here. Thank you for all of your hard work. Thank you so much. I always say that if I send an email at 11 p.m., at 11:01, I'll receive a response to my email. And so I'm very grateful to you for all of your hard work that you do on our behalf. Again, thank you. Thank you so much. I also want to acknowledge you for being here. Look around you, y'all. This is it's exceptional. It's the most people I've ever seen at any opening presentation. And I know you've come to see Dr. West, right? That helped a little bit, but I just want to say how grateful I am to you for being here. I want to say how grateful I am to you. We are thrilled to have you here with us as we explore the annual meeting theme, interrogating consequential education research in pursuit of truth. We hope you enjoy the thought-provoking sessions, engaging discussions, and collaborative networking events that this meeting has to offer. This is an unparalleled opportunity for you to connect with colleagues from across the world and explore the latest development in the field of education. Tonight, we are honored to have a person of great intellect and courage to deliver our keynote address. Throughout his career, Dr. Cornel West has called for rigorous engagement with education research that seeks to challenge the narrative and promote justice and equity, a focus that dovetails well with our theme. This lecture is the first ever AERA lateral learning lecture for equity and diversity, providing attendees with an opportunity to hear from a distinguished scholar outside of the field of education, whose research has significant implications for the work we do in education research. I want to say, and I want to acknowledge all of the council members, executive board members. Thank you for getting behind this idea. And I know that Dr. Howard, as he and I have already spoken, he's going to continue. I'll let him share the good news about who will be here next year. But we're going to continue in the tradition of learning from our colleagues in other disciplines. Are y'all still with me? All right, all right. Dr. West is a faculty member at Union Theological Seminary, where he teaches in philosophy of religion, African American critical thought, and a wide range of other subjects, including classics, philosophy, politics, cultural theory, literature, and music. He is the former professor of the practice of public philosophy at Harvard University and professor emeritus at Princeton University. When I reached out to Brother West, and I say he's Brother West, I mean, if you spent any time with him, you know how gracious he is as a human being. He said to me, just say I teach at Union Theological Seminary. He said, that's actually good enough, right? But I did a little bit of digging, and I found out some other important facts about Dr. West. I will just leave you with the fact that Dr. West is a member of the best fraternity in the land, called Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. That's why I said it. That's right, I said it. 06. Okay, all right. I know I have to be inclusive. But I had to put that out there, Dr. West, that you are a member of the best fraternity in all of the land. I would be remiss if I did not also recognize my former doctoral student, Mr. Jawanza Rand. Please stand, Jawanza, and be recognized. I know y'all like, why are we clapping for Jawanza? Some of y'all still looking, but I want to say that Jawanza was very instrumental as one of Cornell's master students. He was very instrumental in putting me in touch with Dr. West. Dr. West actually endorsed one of my books in the past. Jawanza facilitated that, and he also facilitated this invitation. And so I'm very grateful to almost Dr. Jawanza Rand. He will defend in a couple weeks. We'll make sure that it happens. Let's give it up for Jawanza. Let the give credit where credit is due. Yes, 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 yes. Yes. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming to the podium none other than the Cornel West.
Oh, what a blessing to be here. AERA 2023. I want to begin by saluting the captain of the ship, my dear brother, who's given such kind and generous words. H stands for Henry. H, Richard Miller IV. Oh, yes. And just keep in mind that he is the Cornelius Vanderbilt professor of the Peabody College of Vanderbilt University. Now, you know and I know Cornelius didn't plan on that. God bless him. God bless him. Glad he gave him money. But most importantly, our dear brother, he represents high standards of spiritual, moral, and intellectual engagement. And that's why he's such a grand leader. We want to thank you so very much, our dear brother. Brother Tyrone Howard, same tradition, same legacy, and it is true. And I actually want both of them to stand, the two of the greatest visionary and courageous educators, not just in the great city of Chi-Town, not just the great urban center of Chicago, but in the American empire. Duo, Dr. Carol D. Lee, Dr. Safisha Makabute, along with Hakeem Mahabute. They go together. The Institute of Positive Education, the New Concept Development Center, Fairwell Press, gone for 57 years, the longest independent black press, not just in America, in the world. And most importantly, it's their profound, consistent, genuine love of black people, not putting others down, but making a priority for those on the chocolate side of town. Let's give it up for the three grand exemplary. Oh, yes, there they are. There they are. Lord have mercy. Over 30-some books between them. And it is true that anytime Carol calls, I come running. Haki calls, I come. Isn't that right? I got my wife here, Dr. Anahita Madavi West, got a poetry book coming. Am I right, though, my baby? Absolutely right. And I say that in all seriousness because, you see, this very sophisticated title we got, Interrogating Consequential Research in Pursuit of Truth. I say, oh, we got to start with vocation. What kind of calling do you have? If you really want to put flesh on those words, and the words are always inadequate. They're always moving and grooving and broken. And we see it in the artists, our dear brothers and sisters, indigenous brothers and sisters, bringing not just the drums, but the spirits of those precious persons who were crushed by European settlers years ago, but their spirits are still strong, meaning what? Sometimes you need song to break the back of the words in order to be true to the best of the words. Give it up for the Oklahoma Redwater. In the same spirit, and the same is true with Mantu. The same is true with the Mantu. You see, art for we educators is not additive or ornamental. It is constitutive of who we are. We don't preserve our sanity, our dignity, our sense of resistance and resilience without song, without the notes, without the silence between the notes, and then to connect those who created those notes to allow us to keep keeping on in the language of one of the geniuses that ever come out of Chicago named Curtis Mayfield. Let's just be honest. I want to salute my dear sister Felice. Ooh, my dear sister Felice Lavigne, you come out of a great tradition and legacy, being true to it, embracing others, but also always having the courage to be your Brooklyn self. Oh, yes, and Brooklyn is a special borough now. Let's just be honest about it. Felice Lavigne, Bernie Sanders, Barbara Streisand. We can go on and on. We can go on and on. But that's a rich tradition. And it's a grand tradition. I wish I could see my dear brother Dwight McKee. He's sitting in the back. He's one of the great educators as well with Sister Jan, his magnificent companion. There she is. There she is. Why do I invoke these folk? Marshall Hatches and others. Because they are exemplars of vocation. And you can't talk about mustering the courage to think critically, mustering the courage to interrogate, scrutinize, and question prevailing assumptions and presuppositions unless you have a fundamental calling. And this cuts against the grain of narrow conceptions of careerism and truncated conceptions of profession. The very culture of professionalism under the aegis of predatory capitalist processes and white supremacists and male supremacists and homophobic and transphobic and any ideology that loses sight of humanity that still shapes too much of our world, too much of our society, too much of our empire. The very culture of professionalism produces highly skilled persons who end up too well adjusted to injustice. Very smart people, mastery of skills, know the jargon, master the terminology, and yet still so conformist, the powers that be. Complacent when suffering is on the other side of town and hasn't made its way to your neighborhood. And then outright cowardliness, just scared and intimidated. Laughing when it ain't funny and scratching when it don't itch. You want to put on the mask in order to make sure your upward mobility as an individual is intact. And too often we don't have the organic connection to those who have been left behind. So we end up being these grand examples of success and we lose sight of moral and spiritual greatness. And oh, this is a difficult message for any slice of the professional managerial class in our day, because there's a disconnect between the overwhelming suffering of the precious masses of people. I don't care what color, what gender, what sexual orientation. I'm talking about the 60-some% of our fellow citizens who never set foot in a college. And yet we're reminded so many of the great geniuses like James Baldwin never went to college, but a college went through him. Meaning what? Education in its grandest sense is not just a matter of formal education and gaining access to a credential and a diploma, even though I applaud all of those who do. I'm not against success, I'm against the fetishizing of success. Oh, I'm not against upward mobility, but if you don't believe the way my dear sister Dorothy Irene Height, Delta sister, put it, if you're not reaching to others and lifting as you climb, then all of your professional success just allows you to be a peacock walking around trying to gain central attention. Look at me, look at me. I'm the spectacle of success now. I'm the first X. I'm the second Y. I'm head of the DEI. And I said, oh, that's a wonderful thing. You wouldn't have got there if the masses hadn't engaged in rebellion and sacrifice through blood, sweat, and tears to open the doors to make sure you gain access to it. But if all you're going to be is a peacock, then I understand when they see peacock strut, but they can't fly. I come from a great black people. Oh, I want to be honest with you tonight. I am who I am because somebody loved me. Somebody cared for me. Somebody attended to me. My mama, Irene B. West, got a school named after her, the elementary school near the chocolate side of Sacramento. My father, coming out of Shiloh Baptist Church like her, and me and family founded the Shiloh Arms right next to the Black Panther Party, where the Shiloh Baptist Church with Willie P. Cook and Deacon Hinton and Sarah Ray, my vacation Bible school teacher, shaped us. And they told us that your greatness will be exemplified by staying in contact with the great ones who came before, because there's never been a people for 400 years who've had to deal with such chronic hatred every day, every month, every year, and still keep generating love warriors every generation. There goes Frederick Douglass. There goes Harriet Tubman. There goes Ida B. Wells, Chicago. There goes Donny Hathaway, Alpha. There goes John Coltrane, Love Supreme. We ain't got to Aretha yet. That's not a function of skin pigmentation. Let us be honest about it. Education teaches us that the vicious legacy of white supremacy impacts black and brown, and Asian, indigenous people in vicious, barbaric ways. But the response and the resilience and the creative engagement with it is not a function of skin pigmentation. It's a function of their vocation, their spiritual formation, their moral action. That's why, and I talked to my dear sister Ebony, who was just so wonderful in dialogue as well as the presentation. Something going on at Vanderbilt. We won't go into that right now. I was talking to Brother Kevin about that. Something happened at Vanderbilt with all y'all coming out of there. But we in Chicago, which is to say we in upper Mississippi, and those wonderful waves from Eastern Europe and other parts of Europe, and now Asia, and our precious brothers and sisters from Mexico and Latin America and others, all in the great American city. Now, I live on 110th Street. We live in Harlem. New York, very much like Paris, belongs to the world. Chicago is all USA all the way down. And the great creation of Chicago, the blues, urban style, Howlin' Wolf and Leroy Carr, Muddy Waters, straight out of Mississippi, Mahalia Jackson and Pilgrim's Baptist Church with Reverend J.C. Julius Caesar Austin, known as the breakdancing preacher, 50 years before MC Hammer. Moonwalking before Michael Jackson's mama was born. That's J.C. Austin with Thomas Dorsey on the piano, who'd already written 95 songs for Ma Rainey. And when his mother and his baby died at the same time, he came back to the church and became the founder of modern gospel that generates the James Clevelands and the Aretha Franklin and the Clara Wards and the Shirley Caesars. Why do I mention them? Because as educators wrestling with a sense of vocation, we first had to begin with, who are we? No name calling at others, no finger pointing at others. Who are you? What you gonna do? What kind of human being are you? What kind of commitments are you gonna have between your mama's womb and tomb? Do you have what it takes to seriously wrestle with the most terrifying question that any of us have to wrestle with? What does it mean to be human? Socrates says, the unexamined life is not a life for the human. The English word human comes from humando, which means what? Burial. We are featherless, two-legged, linguistically conscious creatures born between urine and feces, who somewhere, very soon, sometime, maybe tonight, could be the culinary delight of terrestrial worms. I just want to remind you on this night And so if you're a serious educator, you're going to have to get some intellectual, spiritual, moral, and political armor in place. And what is distinctive about the greatness of black people is that in the face of the most demonic forces of terror, what does Rilke say about beauty? Beauty ain't nothing but the first touch of terror that we can bear and still respond. That's our Austrian Jewish. Well, he's Jewish, he's half Jewish, half Catholic, but we've got to work that out later. Rilke. What is it about the best of a blues people that in the face of such overwhelming, organized hatred, black people decide not to form a black version of the KKK? If black people had decided to do that, there'd be a civil war every generation. Every black community would be a cell of terrorists, trashing black people, or white people, killing black people, white people, murdering white people. No, not at all. Here comes Fannie Lou Hamer. Here comes Martin King. Here comes Marcus Garvey. He ain't never called for killing white folk at all. Here comes Stevie Wonder, Love in the Need of Love. Here come the OJs with the Love Train. These are not just songs, y'all. This is a deep spiritual, moral wrestling with what it means to be human, to say we will not deny the hatred coming at us, but we will not produce more hatred. We will hate the injustice, hate the domination, hate the subjugation, but be open to solidarity. So here comes the Vanilla Brother, John Brown. I'm in love with black folk. Really? Let's see, John. I want to be your ally. Really? Let's see, John. And we discovered John Brown is very much like Bill Evans in the Miles Davis Quartet. He's a white brother playing the piano. He ain't no ally. He's in the damn band. Y'all see my point? It's like Greg, the white drummer in Sly and the Stone. He ain't no white ally. He's in the band. He proves it every time they play. Thank you for letting me be myself again. They in it together. White, black, red, yellow, Jewish, Palestinian, Arab, Muslim, Christians like me, all in it together. How come? Because they have decided to opt for integrity, honesty, decency, generosity, solidarity across the board, and look at the world from the lens of the least of these, of the subjugated, of the wretched of the earth, that the great Frantz Fanon wrote about with such courage. He had a vocation. Doesn't mean they always right. All this debate about critical race theory, nothing but being weaponized by folk who so grounded in ignorance and so afraid and frustrated that they don't know what they're talking about. But the first thing we say is, hey, there's a difference between truth, capital T, and truth, small t. All human beings are fallible. All human beings are finite. No individual or group has a monopoly on truth or beauty or goodness or even the holy. We're all in it in conversation with each other, but grounded in our distinctive tradition. And this is why now that the American empire is in such spiritual decay and moral decrepitude, you can see the disintegration, you can see the dissolution, the distrust, the unbelievable paranoia, the inability of people to relate to each other as human beings, not just polarization that the corporate media puts forward with the mean-spirited, cold-hearted, leaning neo-fascist Fox News, or the milquetoast, hypocritical neoliberal CNNs and MSNBCs. Oh, no, none of them want to talk about Wall Street. None of them want to talk about the Pentagon. None of them want to talk about militarism. None of them want to talk about drones dropped on innocent people. None of them want to talk about the ways in which the class hierarchy, no matter how colorful it becomes, is still predicated on the suffering of working poor people who are subjugated even as we become more assimilated in the structures. Now, there's nothing wrong with being in those structures, but if those structures blind you to the suffering of what's going on in the reservations, in the barrios, in the hoods, and in working class contexts, no matter who they are, poor, white, or whatever, then it shows that, lo and behold, you have become yourself seduced by the successes of profession and more distant from the real challenges of vocation. Same is true in terms of the trauma. That the levels of sorrow and depression and chronic despondency that's at work in our empire, in our democratic experiment. And we're both a democratic experiment and we're an empire, and we're reminded by our indigenous brothers and sisters. I tell my black folk all the time, I'm so glad we had Buffalo Soldiers. Oh, so they could kill indigenous folk? Get off the crack pipe, brother. This is not just some tribal identification. You got a black mayor now. Wonderful. Brother Brandon, I'm glad. But we've seen black politicians come and go. The question is, what are they made of? What they gonna do? Are they gonna pursue policies for poor and working people, or will they have to deal with the permanent government in Chicago or New York or America, which is always big business? Those are difficult truths we have to come to terms with. Thank God for W.B. Du Bois. Thank God for Paul Robeson. Thank God for C.L.R. James. Thank God for Claudia Jones. Thank God for Amir Baraka. Why? Because they force us, even in our professional context, that have to deal with certain painful truths. So when you pursue truth, and the condition of truth is what? To allow suffering to speak. If you're not going to allow the suffering to speak, then it's not a quest for truth. It's a quest for something else. Could be efficiency, could be trying to fit in. But truth is a dangerous thing. My dear brother Tyrone knows this in relation to my dear brother Mark Willie Thomas in Los Angeles right now. But it's been true in the history of this nation. All of the great truth tellers about the truths and the sufferings and the subjugations and the resistances of poor people, and especially for me, black people, have been criminalized. Black love is a crime in a white supremacist world. Get ready, if you're going to pursue truth, to be misunderstood, to be misconstrued, character assassination, or the actual thing. That's why vocation is so important. That's why the movement of the bodies, the dance, the drums, those are not just instruments. They are extensions of bodies and minds and hearts and forms of creativity that's grounded on the death, the physical death of those. And we're trying to ensure that the afterlife of those who have died remind us that we can still fight and be truth tellers and be willing to pay whatever cost it takes. Now, I'm not saying martyrdom is normative to be a good professor in the Department of Education. I'm not going that far. But I can tell you this, that black people will never be free if we don't have folk who love black people enough to die for them. Oppressed people will never, ever be free if you don't have folk who are willing to tell the truth and seek justice and have solidarity with others and be willing to pay whatever price it takes. And this is our challenge to our young people. I want the folk from Betty Shabazz School, which is the school of the Mahabutis. Are they still here? Are they still around? Have them stand up. Have them stand up. Have the young folks stand up wherever they are. Wherever they are. And the reason why I point this out, whether they're here or not, we love them wherever they are. Is that the question is, how do you pass it on? Like that genius from the south side of Chicago named Lorraine Hansberry in Raising in the Sun. And what did Mama say? There's never been a figure on the stage in the history of America with more love than Mama. Never. She wasn't always right on everything, but she had the deep love. And what did she tell Walter? By example, you're going to pass on the great tradition of these people who generated all of these love warriors and freedom fighters and wounded healers and joy spreaders. Tell Travis, not just in words, but in example. The time you spend, the energy you exert, the courage that you generate in others. By example, how do we pass it on? That's what Betty Shabazz School is. So they can see, Carol, they can see Hotkey. It's not just their arguments and the poems, and not just their scholarship. It's in their deeds and actions, in their bodily invested ways of connecting with them so that they can feel it in the depths of who they are and say, lo and behold, is that what having a vocation is all about? Because education, that formation of attention to attend to the things that really matter and turn away from the superficial things, that cultivation of critical sensibility that gives you the courage to cut against the grain and be in the academy but not of it, and in the world but not of it. And then the maturation of a loving soul that says, I am going to do just like James Brown does every concert. What does James Brown do every concert? That brother comes out on the stage and goes 3.5 hours, can hardly breathe, and then ends every performance with humility. He says, I am an extension of you. You're an extension of me. I don't exist without you. That's what he tells the Apollo crowd. Did anybody come here to hear a song that you didn't hear? You didn't play Soul Power. Hit it, Bootsy. Play it right on the spot. Because you came to serve. You came to empty yourself. You came to sacrifice yourself, not in a sadistic way, but because most importantly, and I know I got to bring this to a close, we're going to have a wonderful dialogue with Brother President, because you find joy in struggle. You find joy in the sparkle in the eye of those precious young folk. So much of the world's given up on, and yet they come back stronger than ever. You find joy in the culture, the structures of feeling, the structures of value that have been created by a hated and haunted people, whatever colors they are, but an oppressed people. And it ain't narrow pleasure. We're not talking about American culture, but in many ways it's nothing but a joyless quest for insatiable pleasure. And get every kind of pleasure you want, every kind of titillation and stimulation you want, and your soul is still empty and vacuous, and you still don't have no spine. And when it's time to fight, can't nobody find you. And when it's time to take a stand, can't nobody catch you. So your rhetoric is going one way, but your sacrifice ought to be going somewhere else. That is the test of passing it on, because young folk look at what we do more than what we say. And so as educators, you all know what I'm talking about because you're inactive. You constitute the glue that's holding so much of this society together. I'm not saying you're doing it all by yourself, but you're part of it. But it is dying. The empire is dying. There's been 70 empires since the history of the species, going back to the heritage in Africa. The American empire is the 68th empire in the history of the world. And every empire has certain common features that collapses: military overreach, corruption of elites in both parties, corruptions of the professional managerial class that segregates itself from the precious working class and masses and then denies the worst of its history and wants to live like an ostrich with its head in the sand, thinking that chickens don't come home to roost, thinking that you're not going to reap what you sow, thinking that you can continually deny the history of indigenous peoples and women and black folk and Asians and working people. Sooner or later, truth crushed the earth will rise again. Every generation, you've had to have folk to remind America about that. And let us be honest, when it came to the Civil War, the Confederacy that was fundamentally committed to keeping black people in slavery in perpetuity. That's what it was. Even when Abe Lincoln from out of Illinois said he would compromise with the South and allow that, what did Frederick Douglass say? Abe Lincoln ain't nothing but a slave hound from Illinois. Oh, that's my Frederick Douglass. But when Abe Lincoln changed his mind, he said, oh, you want to break the back of American apartheid, American slavery too. Then he came together. He was jazz-like. He was improvisational. He was flexible. He was protean. He wasn't dogmatic. The Vanilla Brother changed his mind. He's open to solidarity. If he still wants to compromise, he gets indictment. That's the Frederick Douglass that we need to keep track of in our own day. Yeah, good God Almighty. I've been praying for that brother for 35 years with no results whatsoever. I'm telling you. And Clarence is a beautiful black man aesthetically. He is. I love the way he looks. He looks like one of my uncles. But he just happened to be wrong as two left shoes 96% of the time. But it's not just Clarence. We can talk about some of these Democratic Party politicians too. Oh yes, they get in there break dancing about diversity. When it comes to time to expand the military budget, they are in the vanguard. Can't say a mumbling word about folks suffering in the Middle East. Can't say a mumbling word about what's going on Wall Street. Can't say a mumbling word about the powers that be at top, but want to act like they Malcolm X's second cousin when they come out and give a speech. Hey, I ain't going for that. No, and I'm saying this in love. I'm a Christian now. I'm saying it in love. I'm serious. But love of people, especially oppressed people, love of truth bigger than all of us, love of beauty grander than all of us, love of goodness. All of us stand indicted in some way. In some way. All the gangster in me, all the thuggishness in me. Tupac was telling the truth. He was my student when he was 10 years old at the Timbuktu School of National Black United Front, Reverend Herbert Daltrey, Pentecostal brother, founder of the National Black United Front, the most progressive organization in the 1980s. Is that right, Brother Haki? You remember him? The National Black United Front. Barack is there, Haki is there, James Cone is there. What's going on in this Pentecostal church? I was blessed to be there every Wednesday. That's one of the reasons why I like to lecture with no notes. Because I'm speaking to the people and I want to look straight in their eyes. I can see Tupac right now sitting on the front row next to Afeni, his magnificent mother. What a grand figure. But he's the first to remind us, the thug in us, the thug in him, and also the love and the revolutionary end and aim. That's both humility and tenacity. So let me end this on a blue note. Interrogate. Consequential research in pursuit of truth. Oh, I love that, Brother Miller. I know that comes straight out of Miller and Vanderbilt because it's real. It's real. The prioritizing of the subject matter. What is the blues? The blues ain't nothing but a personal narrative of catastrophe lyrically expressed. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be driving too. That's B.B. King. That's the B side of The Thrill Is Gone of 1974. Strange fruit that southern trees bear. The inimitable Billie Holiday of Baltimore City. The Jewish brother Maripol writing the lyric. That's catastrophe. I've never told my students, Brother Jawanza, remember this at you. There's a black problem or a Negro problem. No, there's no such thing. There's been catastrophes visited on black people. Don't reduce the catastrophic to the problematic. Because once you think it's just a problem, you think that your professionalism can come in and manage the problem. No! There's never been a problem of indigenous people. There's been catastrophes visited on indigenous people for 400 years. There's never been a woman's problem. There's been catastrophes visited on women. Don't confuse, don't deodorize the funk of catastrophe and come up with problems. Next thing you know, you're going to be throwing a hand grenade in the face of a fog and think you solved the problem. White supremacy is like a fog and a fluid. It's not a problem that's manageable. So when you study it, keep track of a particular aspect, variable, dimension, absolutely. But understand that it's functioning on levels that cut at a conscious and unconscious level. And if you yourself, especially if you're a person of color, you wouldn't even have the confidence in yourself. You wouldn't even believe enough in yourself to think that you could write whatever you write. And if your grandmama and your granddaddy didn't muster the courage to pass on a love in you that allowed you to straighten your back up. If Richard Wright and Ralph Ellison and Gwendolyn Brooks and the others hadn't written to turn you around. We're working on that level, the honesty of it. And so I end on a blue note. We're at a moment now where the species itself can generate the destruction of the planet. Our young people are confronting that in ways in which many of us did not in the 60s and 70s. We're dealing with an empire that every day seems to be enacting more and more self-destruction. Neo-fascism is escalating all the time. Vicious attacks on the most vulnerable. It could be trans, it could be black, it could be indigenous people, it could be Asian. But also the self-destruction of each and every one of us as we wrestle with the various forms of despair and hopelessness and helplessness and unbelievable sense of there being no way out. And it reminds me of the Blue Note of 1837 of Henry Highland Garnett, one of the greatest of all of our freedom fighters in the early part of the 19th century. He only had one leg, so he's leaning on his crutch. It's probably a little gangster lean. And he stood before the civic convention. And he said, black people, never confuse our situation with that of the Israelites in the Christian Old Testament, which is the Hebrew scripture by our precious Jewish brothers and sisters. Not the same, but overlap. Never confuse it. For black people, Pharaoh is on both sides of the bloody Red Sea. I heard my dear brother Sharpton, who I love so deeply, disagree with so intensely sometimes. Just talked to him today. He's having his conference. He's got some elites coming through. But he's still in some ways a force for good, in other ways I push him. And he pushes me. But he stood there at the funeral of Brother Tyree. Some of you may have seen it in Memphis. He said, Martin Luther King Jr. stood up on the mountaintop. And let me tell you what he saw. What did he see, Brother Sharpton? He saw Barack Obama and Kamala Harris. I said, no, that ain't what he saw. No, Brother Sharpton, no. That's not what he saw. See, what did he see, Brother West? I don't know what he saw, but he didn't see that. But if he saw anything, King was an educator, not just a PhD holder. If he saw anything, he saw new pharaohs, some of them of color, operating to impede the struggle, the dignity, the resistance, the resilience of precious oppressed people. That's the kind of love warrior Martin was. You could say the same thing about Ella Baker, same thing about Fannie Lou Hamer, same thing about Stokely Carmichael. You could disagree with them all you want. Angela in the same way. Sister Angela was kind enough to write a magnificent blurb for my wife's book. But Angela the same way. I ain't a communist. I love Angela anyway. How come? She says what it means. She means what she says, and she's always keeping track of the new pharaohs. But that also means keeping track of the pharaoh operating inside of us. And that is the blue note, because the blues is precisely about the intellectual honesty, the humility, the truth-telling, the justice-seeking, justice being what love looks like in public. And so they become examples in our own work, in your own work. So you become blues-like and jazz-like, because now that the whole empire and planet has the blues, you either learn the best from a blues people or you lose everything. That's what is at stake in 2023. Thank you all so very much. You've been very kind. You've been very kind. Thank you so much, President Milner. Thank you so much, my brother. Thank you very much, my dear sister. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, my brother. Appreciate you. Appreciate you, my brother. Brother, I'm sorry.
Brother, that was excellent, brother. That was excellent. Let's give it up again for Cornell West. Cornell West.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. God bless 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 you.
I just want to say how appreciative I am. It was everything that I could have expected and more. So grateful to you. So thankful. For those of you who will stay with us, what we will do now is engage in some dialogue, the two of us. And then we will, after I pose a question or two, I'm going to ask for those of you who have questions to make your way to the microphones that are in the aisles here in the auditorium. So please make your way to the microphones to pose your question. Now, as you pose your question, I'm going to ask for you to pose a question, right? In other words, you might share some of your accolades or some of your adoration for Dr. West, but then pose a question, right? Because we want to hear from our esteemed keynote speaker, all right? After we have finished with the Q&A,
oh, okay. Thanks.
if you are leaving, I want to ask you to please leave quietly. Please leave quietly. All right. Ask you to please leave quietly. Please leave quietly. If you are, if you choose to pose a question, I will ask that you pose that question. Make it, as succinct as you possibly can, and then Dr. West will respond and provide his insights. So again, I want to thank you all for being here. And if you can stay, please stay. We do have a reception that will follow the discussion. Once again, Cornell West, Cornell West. All right. So I want to move us forward and have a conversation with the educators in the audience. I want to give them some hope if we're able to support the work they do in ways that might be additive to the hard work that they're already doing. And so I really would love for you to talk to now the practicing teacher, the school counselor, the psychologist, the school leader, right? Spend some time kind of talking to them about how they be excellent even in this moment of pushback, even in this moment of lies about CRT, even in this moment of all that the teachers and educators are having to grapple with. Talk to the teachers.
Yeah, but that excellence you talk about is so crucial. And keep in mind, excellence always comes in a number of different forms. There's academic excellence, intellectual excellence, there's spiritual excellence, there's moral excellence, and they all have to be tied together. But the first thing I think, especially for precious young folk, no matter who they are, is that they've got to get a sense of a belief in themselves. They have to feel as if they're not only capable, but they have to feel as if their capability is something that they can reach a point such that they can take it for granted. Yes. See, part of the problem living in a white supremacist society is that black people and other people of color are in perpetual audition. You see, in perpetual, you have to prove themselves over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. You say, hey, wait a minute. I think that I've done enough to warrant some sense of acknowledging that I can do what I've already done. But that's not the way it is. So then the question becomes, well, don't in any way view yourself through the lens of the very authorities and people who have you under perpetual audition. See, that the white gaze is a gaze, it's not the gaze. So you don't eliminate the white gaze. No, you eliminate white gaze, you lose John Brown and Ann Braden and Rabbi Heschel and a host of others. You said, we're not going to lose Felice. Where is she? We ain't losing this sister right here. You know what I mean? She's in the band. You see what I mean? But it's a gaze, a voice. And there's other gazes and voices, and the best of us trying to accent the best of each other. And then there's a worst of us, and we're trying to hold at arm's length, the worst of each other and the worst of us. So that the first thing I would say is for practical teachers, let's say, especially with students, is try to accent the strengths so they can see that they can fly like eagles. That's very important. When I was in the 3rd grade, I was put in a class. In those days, they called it mentally retarded, but these days we call it physically challenged, I think. Because I had a lot of energy and had a lot of rage, and I had some challenges, I just put it that way. And when I went there, I got some of the greatest inspirations because there was Brother Rudy there playing the piano. He's blind like Ray Charles and sound like Stevie Wonder. And I said to myself, Rudy, how you doing? Rudy said, Lil Ronnie, that was my name. Lil Ronnie, I practice all day. Practice to get that self-confidence. That's crucial for young folk. Discipline, you got to work at it. It's not no push-button success. You have to sacrifice. Find joy in the sacrifice. And then connect it to your sense of cultivation of critical orientation, your sense of focusing on what matters to you, and your sense of learning how to mature to become more caring. So the next thing you do, he's trying to teach me the piano. And I'm trying to sing a song and play at the same time, but it's not working out. But that sense of, I go to that class and got more fired up than in the mainstream class with the white teacher who kicked me out. Now, as a Christian, I say, oh, the Lord work in mysterious ways. But for my more secular brothers and sisters, I would say, isn't that something? Isn't that something? That's something I'll never forget. I'll never forget because of that sense of believing in one. Now, I got it at home and in church, but that sense of at school became very important. And it's something that you do it all the time. I mean, the tribute of the students talking about you, brother, it's just a beautiful thing, how you passing that on spiritually, by example, intellectually, academic excellence, but also political sensitivity. And we're not talking about indoctrination. The anthem of black people is lift every voice. Exactly, it's not lift every echo. And you can't find your voice. Just like a jazz man or a blues woman, you got to find your voice to be part of the tradition. You can't be an imitation or an echo. You're going to be an echo. You're not going to make it in Chicago. You got to find your voice. That tremendous discipline, openness, learning, listening, learning how to assert, learning how to cooperate, learning how to critique, and then, in the end, being true to yourself.
Yeah. Let's give it up. Let's give it up. True to yourself. I want to pose another question, and then I'm going to ask those of you who are in the audience who would like to pose a question to make your way to the microphone. We are a group, mostly a group of educational researchers. What should we be reading in this moment? What would you recommend? Who should we be reading in this moment?
Wow. God Almighty. I mean, the beautiful thing is that all of us come from traditions of resilience and resistance, that no matter how defeated it seems, we have spirits that are unstoppable and unsuffocatable.
Yes.
And so the question becomes, what voices can we be connected with? The voices of the quick, those who are alive, and the voices of the dead, those who are gone. Now, I mentioned some of the names in my reflections there. But these days, for me, Audre Lorde is actually meaning more and more to me in terms of the complicated connection and interplay between individuality on the one hand and community on the other, looking at the world from bottoms up with the most vulnerable. Because a lot of times these days we're homogenizing communities and homogenizing groups, and we lose the individuality within those groups. And we lose our own individuality and feel in order to be authentic, we've got to conform to whatever the prevailing criteria of authenticity is. And Audre Lorde shatters that. She shatters that. Bell Hooks does too. But then there's always, you know, the great figures of the past. The Toni Morrison. I think Toni Morrison is the greatest intellectual produced in the last 50 years. You read the source of self-image, which is not a fiction. The source of self-image. Read that once or twice this summer, and you will emerge a different person. That's our dear Sister Toni, and I don't say that just because I knew her and just loved her like an aunt. We taught together, we worked together, we went to Stockholm together, we got the Nobel Prize. I told her too. I said, you know, Sister Toni, you're too good for the Nobel.
All right.
She said, what you mean, honey? I said, you're too good. It's just like Sam Cooke and Curtis Mayfield and Sly Stone. They never got a Grammy. Milli Vanilli got 2. They're too good for the Grammy. You don't need these criteria to define your greatness.
You better speak.
Exactly. Exactly. Sarah Vaughan don't need no mainstream folk to tell her who she is. We call her divine, we telling the truth. And then that's why the great, singers in opera would steal away and make sure you go to set. I used to go see Sarah Vaughan every night, 5 nights in a row. I'd be lighting her cigarette. She's a chain smoker, the greatest vocalist of the 20th century, chain smoker. I said, Miss Vaughan, it's all right, honey, please. I said, oh, and they sitting there and you go, my God, that's so-and-so from the Metropolitan Opera. That's so-and-so. And there's Sarah, coming out of Mount Zion Baptist Church on the chocolate side of Newark, New Jersey. But levels of discipline, unbelievable. Do you think that she's obsessed with what the mainstream titles and honors are? Go on and give it to Doris Day. Let her live a life of self-deception for a while. I'm Sarah Vaughan. Billy told others the crown was passed to me. If Billy said that, I don't care what Rolling Stone, Downbeat, any TV show, it doesn't make any difference. They know what the point of reference is. Charlie Parker set the standard. It wasn't on the other side of town, not because of skin pigmentation, because of levels of excellence. And we need to tell our young folk that, because these young folk these days are so obsessed with celebrity and titles and honors and so forth. Wait a minute. You come from a people who had been overlooked by mainstream and yet producing some of the deepest levels of genius and talent in the history of the century. Don't get caught up with the titles and the honors and so forth and so on. Now, if you win one, that's good, and take the money and show up, and say hello, but just keep your integrity.
I want to invite our audience now to the microphones in the aisles, and I can't see you. So
Yeah, no, we can't see these beautiful
oh, okay,
faces.
I see.
Ooh, look
I
at
see
these
you right
beautiful
there.
faces here.
In fact, I'm gonna stand up and go over here. Let you pose the question right here.
Good evening. So my question is, what advice would you give to us who are caught in the crosshairs of big business of education and the extensive need of our Gen Z and COVID kids?
Yes, yes. But see, I should be asking you that question only because you were right there caught on the ground. I'm caught in another space at the seminary, but not on the ground with the young folk. But one thing is, when I talked about being protein and flexible, that we have to be multi-contextual without losing our sense of vocation and calling, without losing our sense of integrity, which means big business is big business. I mean, these are the oligarchs and plutocrats of the society. They wield unbelievable power and influence. Usually, the oligarchs themselves are persons of overwhelming mediocrity. Not all the time, but usually. It's just true. It's just true. I mean, that's the history of affirmative action on the vanilla side of town in terms of how these white brothers get to the very top and exemplify overwhelming forms of mediocrity. But they still have power. And then there's always a heterogeneity among the wealthy classes and the ruling classes and power elites and so forth, right? So you're going to have some folk who really want to do the right thing, just don't know how to do it. Then they ought to come to your class. You say, this is how I do it, and I think I'm doing it in such a way that it could be part of best practices. And that becomes a counterexample to what's in place. So that's the first thing I would say. But the second thing I would say is no matter what, never, ever be discouraged. Never, ever. Nothing wrong with being down and out at a particular moment. But don't be surprised by evil or paralyzed by despair. That's the bottom line. As long as we keep coming, keep fighting, keep laughing, keep writing, keep teaching, keep loving, we unstoppable. So they can't crush all of us. Can't kill all of us. They can't trash all of us. Keep overflowing in a variety of different ways. Now that still, I know in some ways doesn't get exactly to the depths of your question, but that's the beginnings. That's a sketch of an answer to your profound question. Stay strong. Your name is what, my dear sister?
Jamie Mercer, and I'm at Bowie State University.
Right on. Wonderful, wonderful.
All right, here in the center, Please tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Babatunde Alford. I'm a PhD student from Boston College in their School of Education.
Wonderful.
I'm curious I'm thinking about institutions and how institutions can at times be inherently self-protective.
Yes.
But in the later years and even now, as more folks go into institutions or create their own institutions that are anti-colonial, libertarian practices, even in those spaces, can change within an institution ever be self-corrective, or is it always reliant on outside social movements, even if people in those institutions are oriented towards liberatory practices?
Ooh, that's a wonderful question, though, brother. Well, you further along in your PhD, though, aren't you? I like that. Put yourself in their situation. Yeah. Walk a mile in their shoes. Yes, you think you'd have the same perspective? That is social pressure from the outside. From the outside. And the same was true in the 60s. Is that right, Brother Haki? Would you agree with that? Absolutely, from the outside. If we had waited for universities and colleges like Boston College and others, Vanderbilt, Harvard, and so forth, only from the inside, oh my God. Those places would look like the National Hockey League even today. But there's always some folk on the inside, sometimes even in high places, who are willing to learn, listen, respond, grow, and mature. Never lose sight of the humanity of any of your political foes. That's very important. That's very important. If Honorable Elijah Muhammad had lost sight of the humanity of Malcolm Little, We may have never got Malcolm X. The love transformed him, changed him, then he outgrew a lot. That's crucial. Nobody grows up or nobody's born woke. You got to be educated, you got to be socialized, you got to be exposed to things. Brother Haki talks about it in his autobiography of 2005. Classic, Yellow Black Reading, who? Richard Wright. Richard Wright, reading Richard Wright, not just the Richard Wright of Native Son, not just the Richard Wright of Black Boy, the Richard Wright of 12 Black Million Voices. The Richard Wright of literary criticism, the blueprint for black writing. Different kind of Richard Wright. Now I know the sisters will say, oh, well, Richard Wright was such a sexist. Yes, he was. Yes, he was, and you tell the truth about that, and he needs to be rendered accountable and so forth. But he's not reducible to solely a sexist. His sexism is integral to his truth-telling. So we got to tease out that vicious demeaning of women and then look at how he also tells the truth about white supremacy from his own masculinist point of view. And that masculinist point of view, when it comes to racism, still has insights, even though Toni Morrison and the others are going to take it to heights Richard Wright knows not of. Hey, that's the way the tradition is. That's a beautiful thing. The Monk don't sound like Scott Joplin. He play a little ragtime. Scott think he got something going on. Then he hear Monk and say, oh, Monk, that's wrong. And Monk would tell him what Monk told Coltrane in his house. What did he say? Monk, that sounds wrong to me. Sometimes wrong is right. When you're playing around midnight. He's just taking it to a new level. But he's building on what came before. The inimitable Art Tatum. We can go on and on in terms of the great. So that in that sense, my brother, I would say even at Boston College and Chestnut Hill, that a force for good like yourself can still have impact. And never forget that. Yes. Never forget that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. One more question. Absolutely. Absolutely. So right here, please tell us who you are.
Hi, thank you so much for coming here today. I really learned a lot. My name is Weena. I'm a second year. I'm studying history at 116, so we're basically neighbors. But when you talked about self-construction and about morality and spiritual greatness, I couldn't help but think of Grace Lee Boggs, who I know you shared space and dialogue with and had so much conversations about. She writes the difference between revolution and rebellion, and that a revolution allows for that spiritual and philosophical leap. But I was wondering then, what about, and I think a lot of people then, people of color, go into academia for this spiritual and philosophical and academic leap, but I'm wondering, how do we then reconcile the privilege of being able to be in academia? How can we have this leap when there's people within the working class, when there's first-gen low-income students who don't really have the privilege to make this leap, and where do we find these spaces then for this moral, spiritual greatness that you mentioned?
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad you mentioned the Grace Boggs. And James as well, of course, very much a couple coming out of Detroit, working class Detroit, serious revolutionary figure. Solidarity with both Marxist analysis, but also her feminist analysis, her Asian sensibility, his black sensibility. We can go on and talk about the Boggs. I'm so glad you mentioned him. But I think the crucial thing here to keep in mind is that in the end, we're going to be measured by the breadth and scope and love of our courage and compassion for others. That's the legacy that we pass on. Whatever your ideology is it tied to the most vulnerable? Is it tied to the most subjugated and oppressed and so forth? And when you look at it in that way, then you tell yourself, that there's going to be a variety of voices like Grace's and the others. But if I stay in tune with theirs, then no matter what privilege I have, I will be able to use that privilege as a source of armor so that I become even more effective in my quest for truth and being a force for justice. Usually when people think of privilege, they think mainly white privilege. Absolute male privilege, no doubt, someone like myself. But there's imperial privilege. Living in the American empire. One of the reasons why so many of our precious folk from around the world want to get inside of the empire is why? Imperial policies, in part, not exclusively, imperial policies have created such hell for them that the very roads that were built in order to create railroads to go get their resources, to go get their lands and exploit their labor are now being used for them people to walk back to the empire because they have very little sense of possibility and opportunity. The U.S. empire supporting military coups in Guatemala, 54, Brazil in 64, and Dominican Republic in 65. And what was the one that Hillary did in Honduras? Exactly. Then we wonder why it is. Wait a minute, Texas used to be Mexico. California used to be Mexico. How did we get it? Well, it wasn't by means of Socratic dialogue, I can tell you that. It's what Ulysses S. Grant called the most immoral war he could conceive of, the Mexican War. And that's the war where the generals of the Confederacy, Braxton Bragg and the others, fought alongside the generals in the Union. Just like they would come back together in the 1890s and say, well, the Civil War was just a family quarrel, and the sacrificial lambs will be black folk in America, and it will be the 8 million new people of color in Guam and the Philippines and Puerto Rico and Cuba and other places in Asia and in the Caribbean. The consolidation, not just of white supremacy. Let us never fetishize race and white supremacy as if it's something way up here. It viciously attacks people, but it's grounded in economic processes. It's grounded in nation-state policies that are being used in such a way that it turns our attention away from the elites who are benefiting and turns people against each other who need to be coming together. And you see, that also, difficult thing to pull off, but crucial. So when you look at folk who had tremendous privilege, how did they use it? Martin Luther King Jr., what was he? A petty bourgeois Negro preacher. He could have prefigured the prosperity gospel movement if he chose to. He could have used his PhD from BU to end up staying in Boston and becoming having intimate terms with the ruling elites in Boston. No, what did he do? He had middle-class privilege. Now, that's not a whole lot when you're part of the black middle class, because the black middle class ain't nothing but a lumping bourgeoisie anyway. It's not a real strong middle class. It's a slice of black elites at the top. Many of them entertainers, many of them, entertainers, sports these days is entertainment. But it's beneath corporate America. It's beneath the oligopolies. It's beneath the monopolies. But King said what? I love these folks so much. I'm going back down into the belly of the beast. I'm going to Alabama. It was the middle class church, Dexter, but it was Alabama. And within 4 months, what happened to Brother Martin? His whole world turned upside down. They already bombed his house. In January of '56, the FBI is already on him for the rest of his life. And what does Martin say? This is the cross we must bear for the freedom of our people. Oh, given all of his faults and foibles, maybe that's what we keep in mind in terms of using his privilege as a way of being a stronger force for good and for truth and for justice. And he will remain a middle-class brother. He ain't like Malcolm coming from the streets. His daddy was a preacher. His mama was a magnificent Spelman graduate and musician. Alberta, who was the daughter of the former preacher of Ebenezer, where Warnock is now. Brother Ralph Fiel, I love Brother Raphael. But Lord, he's a neoliberal black politician far removed from the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. He's voting for military expansion all the time, won't say a mumbling word about Israeli occupation, won't say a mumbling word about U.S. military around the world. What happened, Brother Raphael? He's a student of mine, I love him. What happened? Well, Brother West, it's tough up here in the Senate. I said, what's tough about it? What's tough about it? The powers and forces of conformity. How much can you take? That's a question all of us must raise. We all wrestling with forces of conformity. I got it at Union, you got it at Vanderbilt, and so forth and so on. How much can you take? I'm looking at that election in Chicago in the last couple of days. See all of these black leaders and politicians jumping on the right-wing bandwagon based on cash money. Then you call them a sellout and they say, don't be name calling me. Hey, brother, I love you and your mama, but you're a sellout. By your deeds, by your action, you ain't got no argument against it. You're there because you're scared, you're imitated, and you want money rather than take a stand for your own people. Shouldn't use that kind of language, Brother West. No. There's nothing wrong with using that language out of love. Because you tell them, and I don't want you to sell out again. I hope you learned something, Bobby Rush. Learn something, brother. I love that brother coming out of the Black Panther Party. I love that brother standing up over and over again. How you end up all warped up over here? Explain it to me. I want to know. I'm still caught with something called integrity. Sorry about that, brother, but I can't help it. I want to know. There's some big things that I need to know. Maybe he got an argument that I need to hear. We can steal away. I'll buy him some cognac in the name of Jesus. Explain to me. I want to know. Because if I did that, how kid I going to steal away at the crib, and he going to explain it to me. He said, Brother West, you can go on too far. You can go on too far. You know, Anahita's here too, but I won't call you a sellout, but I think you're leaning in that direction, and I think you... I say, Brother Hakeem, thank you so very much. I need to hear that, and we work it out. That's the way you work these kind of things. I know I'm going on much too long, but you all see the point I'm making? Yeah. Because what's at stake? What's at stake is the plight and predicament of poor people, black people, subjugated people. Everything is at stake. We don't have time to play these games.
Right. We don't. Cornel West, colleagues. Cornel West. Brother, you feel fine, man. Thank you so much, man. Please join us at the reception. Thank you.